they own this place. It's a big club, and you ain't in it. You and I are not in the big club. And by the way, it's the same big club they used to beat you over the head with all day long when they tell you what to believe. All day long, beating you over the head in their media, telling you what to believe, what to think, and what to buy. The table is tilted, folks. The game is rigged. The owners of this country know the truth. It's called the American dream, because you have to be asleep to believe it.
And he's taught to value these artificial creations and this artificial system. He wakes up in four walls. He can't go outside. He has no movement, and all there is artificial things around him. He can't do anything or decide anything for himself. So this sovereign, this king, this angel is now had all his freedom stripped from him, and he's been cut off from creation. And all he can do is cry and try to make sense of this situation. Why is all this happening? And this poor, beautiful, sovereign angel child, he becomes an indigent slave and begins begging for handouts, and his life is changed. And Anastasia says the system always operates through parents and through those who proclaim themselves to be wise teachers. And so why I say this is because we need to take responsibility for our actions. We've created this world, but we can create a new one too, where the child doesn't have to go through this.
Hey, Inspire Tribe, my fellow freedom lovers. It's John Nolan here. Thank you so much for tuning in. It is Thursday, April 4th, 2024. We're healthy, we're wealthy, we're whole, we're free. The truth is coming out, and we are winning. Welcome on Rumble, welcome on X, welcome on YouTube, welcome in a live chat. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to go a little deeper, as we always do, peel the onion and take off the layers. We don't claim to have the truth, but we do claim to seek the truth every single day. And one of those statements that I'm going to make today is could be shocking on surface, especially in this arena. The system is not broken. The system works perfectly. It does what it was designed to do. And we're going to get into that in depth. But I hear every day in the freedom, truth, alternative media arena, the system was corrupted and that there were bad people in there, and it's become so corrupt. It has become so infiltrated, and naturally we sort of want to believe that that's the problem in and of itself. The problem with and when I talk about the system, I mean all societal structures in place. I'm not simply talking about the government. I'm talking about all societal structures in place that govern our society. And they do. We all function through those or within these structures in one way, shape, or another. And they include everything. They include government. They include the economy. They include science. They include religion. They include everything, right? So this is what when we look at the system at large. And it is doing exactly what it was designed to do. So I want to go with you through sort of the three definitions you could have, or three perspectives you could have on this system, and then talk about a little bit also about the solutions and why the current solutions proposed are not looking at the root issue and are not solving that, right? That's why most of the current solutions out there, 90 to 95%, will not yield the results that people think they would. Okay, but let's look at this here. If it will load, if it will do us a favor, there we go. The system, and this is the narrative, okay? This is the narrative. The system was created to establish order, provide security, regulate societal interactions, and promote the well-being of the community through a structured system of governance. This includes the development of laws, the maintenance of peace, and the provision of public services. So this is the narrative. This means that when you look into books, history books, any other books that describe this, that is pretty much the definition that you're going to get, right? Now, then there is a common belief about what the system is. So this is the system, the belief. This is like, pretty much within the mainstream and on the edges, this is what most people believe. The system was created to help us organize things in more efficient ways and to protect the people and their rights. It was created with good intentions. Corrupt politicians and those with a lot of money exploit the system for their own benefit. Through elections, we can vote out bad people and vote in better people. This is the common belief, and this is where I would say most people sort of land. Like most people will land and find themselves somewhere in here. More, some will go more to the extreme and others less, but pretty much this is what even in the alternative media most believe. Ultimately, the system was created with good intention. Now let's make one thing clear. The founding fathers didn't necessarily create this system. They created or they recreated and added new things and pushed things around. But the fundamental basics of the system were not created by the founding fathers. They were taken and borrowed from previous systems, okay? And so we kind of have to be very, very adult, have to be very mature here in how we look at this. But so basically, most people believe the system was created with good intentions and it was supposed to be fair. It was supposed to be just. It was supposed to serve everybody. And it got corrupted over time with bad people coming in and big money coming in and monopolies coming in. And it was taken over by the deep state. And so there's all these narratives. Here is the third perspective on the system. Let's just look at it together. The system was created over centuries and millennia by malevolent entities to distract man from what is essential, true, and important. It exploits and harvests man's creativity, energy, and labor, and keeps man in invisible chains of servitude. Now, this is, if you go deep enough, and if real research, introspection, intuition, if all these things come together, if the facts that you find, you combine them with logic, you combine them with common sense, and you do all of this, this is where you tend to sort of end up, is that we're not dealing with a broken system. The system does exactly what it was designed to do. If my assumption, and I'm not alone in this, is right, that this is what the system was designed to do. I want to read this to you again, just one more time. The system was created over centuries and millennia by malevolent entities to distract man from what is essential, true, and important. It exploits and harvests man's creativity, energy, and labor, and keeps man in invisible chains of servitude. And what I would like you to do is not take my word for it here. I'd like you to just tune in and see if there's some resonance of truth for you in this statement. That societal structures, they didn't arrive overnight, but they also didn't develop naturally. See, the challenge that we're facing is that one perspective and belief builds on a previous false perspective and belief that built on a previous false perspective and belief, which includes history, vastly false, the way that we were taught it. And naturally, if you put everything in that vastly false historic context, you end up with the false narrative. And that vastly false historic context is that we are on a linear path of evolution. Now, even if you do not subscribe to the mainstream Darwin evolution theory, which in my book is all that it is, it's a theory and really doesn't have much basis in reality, but most people believe that we are better off today on all levels than we were hundreds of years ago. That we were a struggling people, that over millennia, all we did was we were hunters and we were gatherers and we had a hard time gathering food, and we were always suffering and we were always dying and we were always cold. And if you look at that narrative, because that narrative led us to here, and that narrative makes us believe that what we have now is inherently better than what we had then. But let's examine just that narrative and let's look at it with logic. That would make us literally the only species here on Earth that lives that way. No other species inherently struggles all the time and has such a hard time providing for their basic needs. Even today, even in our massively disrupted world where we have messed with so many things, even here you can find perfect examples of nature being nature, and there's no inherent struggle going on. I've never walked through the woods, through the forest, especially more removed from civilization, and found animals that died of hunger, that were skin and bones. I tend not to find those. So the idea that we were struggling hunters and gatherers and could barely survive and always had to fight with each other over those scarce resources. Why were they scarce? Wasn't nature there? Weren't trees, fruit trees there? Weren't berries there? Weren't herbs there? Weren't animals there? I'm just asking for a friend here. So this vastly wrong perspective makes us believe that with the invention of better systems, with more centralization, with better structures, right, we have improved our life. And this has led us to this point where we have modern medicine and we have modern infrastructure and we have all this technology that makes our life so much better than it was at some point in the past. And that we have in a linear way progressed to this point. And in my life, the more I looked into true history, the more I examined these things just with my pure logic, I could never really find the truth in that. So what if, and I've talked about this before, but what if we were actually in a much more optimal and excellent state of being? What if in a time, in a distant past, we were connected, we were balanced, we were in sync with the natural rhythms, and we were expressing ourselves creatively in a natural way, and we were creating beautiful songs, and we were having beautiful celebrations with each other, and we weren't a struggling species. What if in that time we had a natural, perfect connection with the Creator that was never interrupted? Communication was normal, and we added to the beauty of creation. What if that could be the truth? And what if, and we can speculate about the motives, they seem to become clearer every day, but what if a malevolent species, or even parts of our own species, had somehow fallen off the wagon, had somehow forgotten about it? I can only speculate on what that was. But what if we were slowly but surely, and I don't want to go into the biblical story of Adam and Eve and the forbidden apple and the I think we're talking even before, right? I don't think this is all sort of compressed, right? And we don't even know whether that was a day or 1,000 years or 10,000 or 100,000 years. But what if we were distracted? What if in us feelings of greed, of pride, of egotism, of vanity were slowly but surely, very, very subtly instilled and brought out of us, right? What if, for some reason, some of us were told that we're so special now that we are going to interpret the word of God to the people? What if there was a slow progression of sort of falling from grace, if you will, to use this common expression, and that slow progression led us all the way to where we are now? So that would be the exact opposite of the story that we were told. where the story that we were told is we were doing really bad, and where we are now is doing really good. This is the pinnacle of our development. But what if we have really gotten to the bottom, where we have to rely on so many artificial things and structures in order to just survive? The reason why this question is so important is because the solutions, and we are in a beautiful position. The beautiful position is that every day from every corner, people send us proposals, not for us to decide on, but just proposals on how they would love to change the system, create a new system, create a better world. And naturally we invite, and we're excited that so many people are thinking about this, right? We are. But what 95% of these suggestions and plans have in common is that they're looking at the current structure of providing for the people, which is, of course, it's just on the surface, but what means, you have the food that is grown for you, and that is, you don't know who grows it, how they grow it, you don't know their ethics, you don't know the feelings that they put into the plants, you don't know the poisons that they put on the plants, you don't know how much travel, how much distance any given food has to overcome before it lands on a shelf, how long it sits there under the conditions before it finally lands on your plate. We for the most part, people have no idea where that all comes from. And people are looking at the current systems and they're saying we could use the secret hidden technology that we have, and we could create abundance for everybody. But what that says is, once again, the idea of a centralization. So you have a structure, that structure provides, right? And we have enough, and we have the know-how, we have the technology, we have everything that we need, so we could provide for all people. But here's an interesting thing, that those who discover that they're inherently sovereign beings, that are truly free and sovereign, those people don't tend to like to organize all that much. It doesn't seem to be beyond a reasonable, small communities, localized, that make sense for everyday life. Beyond that, freedom and sovereignty loving people don't have a tendency, an internal tendency, to create huge, big systems, centralized systems. And because there's this sense of individualism, there's a sense of individual expression and freedom that is always limited by those structures. Eventually, the structure always takes precedent over the individual expression, because people say, well, that's for the common good. The structure has to be more important than the individual expression of freedom. And the truth is that you start finding out is that not too many people actually want real freedom. I believe, where I've come to the conclusion, if you will, that the only way to have a sort of at least a perception of freedom and sovereignty in this world is to be fully responsible for your own life, your needs, and self-reliant. I think that is the only way. And I think that's what kept people strong. That's what used to keep them responsible. That's what used to keep them moral. Because, see, you had an immediate consequence if you weren't those things. If you didn't keep health, strength, and balance, if you didn't keep sort of freedom and sovereignty intact, you had an immediate consequence. And when people, when in the 20th century was really the death penalty to the remaining sovereignty that people had in their gardens and their orchards and their fruit trees and bushes and berries and whatnot. And a lot of people still had that. And when the people were cut off from it, and this is nowhere as visible as it is in North America, in the United States, it's incredible how people were maneuvered and steered away from this last thing that they had that they could rely on, that they didn't have to have any trust in the system for, because they could plant their food and they could eat that and they could rely on that. And a lot of people had wells and they can get that water. And that last link to freedom and sovereignty, practical freedom and sovereignty, was broken. And here we are, and we're today discussing the corruption of the system and how we need to get better people in. But the truth is that this system, at least in my research, my perception, okay, so that I have to put that behind the truth is, in my perception, that it is doing exactly what it was designed to do. And that, yes, good people are going into the system because they believe it was created inherently good and they want to be good within the system. And those people have the hardest time. It's much easier for bad people to go into the system because, you know, they tend to find what they were looking for. When good people look for goodness in the system, they're disappointed over and over and over again, because what they eventually find out is that the structures weren't created to serve you and me. They really weren't. They weren't created to serve us. And that's only the illusion we have in our minds about it. And everybody who was in the system for a significant time that remained good, had a good heart, had a connection that was intact, every single body eventually realizes that the system is inherently not good. It does what it was designed to do. It keeps people in a state of deception and illusion when they believe in it. And it gives people the illusion that they have some sort of control over everything. All the while, they give up voluntarily the control over the things, or the control over the things that they would really have control over. They give up all these things. They give up everything that would make them even remotely sovereign, because they say, oh, this is easier. I don't have to grow food. Somebody's doing it for me and I can just buy it off the shelves. It's not food. It poisons us. It kills us, right? Another absolute, this is not a development. This is not something that came about just because of greed. This was designed. It was baked into it, that if we would disconnect from our natural foods, from our natural remedies, we would weaken on all levels, spiritually, physically, mentally, and that has happened. And a weaker species is easier to control. The breakup of the family was not a byproduct of industrialization. Rather, the way industrialization was brought about was in order to weaken human being and the family. It's all backwards. We have to all look at it backwards. And so when we look at that more and more and examine it, then we can only come to the conclusion that we will never find the answers in newer, better centralized systems. Because as soon as you centralize a lot of power in one place, even if that idea is good in the beginning, it will be corrupted so quickly and easily. But if you yourself and your family establish a life where you have not just control, but take responsibility for the most important things in your life, and don't assume that the way you do it and your particular way of looking at things must be the right way for everybody, then you will have a sense of freedom and sovereignty. And you will be, to a large degree, independent. Localized communities and localized structures in a limited way make a lot of sense. If you live in a community of 1,000+ people, right, that live close to you, it does make sense to have some way to exchange, right? To have some way. Okay, so I'll give you this piece of paper here, and you give me, I don't know, an hour of your labor because you're a good craftsman. We can have this kind. We can have a localized system of exchange. I think it's illegal to have, to claim that you can create currencies. I think that they made that illegal. But you can probably have means of exchange. I think it does make sense to provide for certain structures within a community that truly do serve everybody. I totally agree with that. I do agree that wherever humans live together, they must create naturally. That's a natural thing to create some sort of structure. But only to the degree that it really serves everybody. Once it begins to, not serve even one person, it's not good anymore. And we think it's impossible. But here's the thing. The current strategy, and we have to look at the strategy, not the talk of the day. The strategy that was put in place was, we have a system, we have a government, we have this, all of this, and you have the power. If you don't like how things are going now, vote in better people. And this is the same answer over and over again. While the problems keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, the same answer seems to, it's insanity to do the same thing over and over again and think that's going to solve things. Can we attempt to vote in better people into certain positions? I've said this before. I do think that probably if we have good people within the structure, we can dismantle it better. That's probably the most the best thing we can do. We can dismantle everything that is unnecessary, and perhaps if we bring it out to the bare bones, we might find some things that are worth keeping. For that, it probably would be good if we can get good people into certain positions, especially in localized structures, because to destroy it, which is what they're doing now, and I'll get to that in a moment, that brings so much chaos. So we're sort of advocating, we're advocating for a way that would allow us to have a transitioning period. And that is, of course, an ideal. If it's achievable, I really don't know. But to understand what is happening, yes, there is corruption within this system that is simply built on greed, yes. But the system in and of itself, it's not corrupt if we look at the word corrupt in the sense of it is not what it was intended to be. It is what it is intended to be. It does what it was supposed to do. And actually it does it excellently. You have to sort of applaud these malevolent beings. I mean, they really did a number on us, and we really allowed them to do it. So now we have to literally assume power again, assume sovereignty over our consciousness, over our thoughts, over ideas, over false concepts and beliefs that we held, and not give ourselves grief about it, but just say, okay, now we know, now we realize, and now we can alter our course. To those who are waiting for the quantum financial system to kick in, waiting for the cleanup that will clean up the structures and make it all better, I'm sorry to tell you, none of these structures will provide you with freedom and sovereignty. They can't. It is just another form of addiction and dependence on a system. Because once again, when these things are out of your sphere of influence, when you have no direct control over these structures, when you don't know where it originates from and how it is brought to you, then that's not freedom. That's only choosing to depend on something that looks better than the other thing. That's all that it is. There is no such thing as a system giving you the solution to your problems. There is no such thing. A system or a teaching or knowledge can assist you in discovering how you can help yourself. That's what it can do. And I want to share a personal story I've never shared, I think, on the air. Babies and little children are known to remember and sort of have a, like the umbilical cord to eternity, if you will, through the veil. And so they remember things mostly on an intuitive feeling basis. And I have this weird thing. I have these memories of my very early infant days. And, people think I'm just making things up a lot of times, but I do have these memories. And I remember lying in the crib, and my parents had always told me that I had cried so much as a baby in the first months, and that it wasn't because of hunger. Like, they would offer me food, but it wasn't that. But I remember lying in the crib. I remember and this is why this intro that I played spoke to me so much. I remember looking at the walls. I remember feeling so trapped inside these walls, and then trapped again inside the crib, and then trapped again inside remember those sleeping bags that they put around babies so you can't get cold? And I felt trapped within the trap, and I felt so disconnected from what I felt was real. And I cried and I cried, and I longed for that feeling of unconditional love and connection that I knew that I had before, where I came from, right? And in our civilized world, in Western societies, but now, I mean, that's now it's everywhere, right? I mean, almost everywhere. So just civilized world, it's become kind of natural to believe that all babies cry, and that babies are just fuzzy and fussy, and they get tired and they get hungry and they cry all the time, and it's sort of become a truth, and it's not a truth at all. In those places, in those rare places where mothers are still very connected, where they're in nature a lot, where babies are with them, and where there is a balanced environment, babies do not cry. They just don't cry. It's not they cry less. They usually don't cry. I mean, maybe on occasion they hurt themselves or there's something, but for the most part they don't cry. It's just not natural. Babies are not naturally loud and fussy beings. And I remember that I almost lost this feeling of connection. Almost. I remember times in my probably around the age of 7, 8, 9, I want to say there, where I was almost giving into, well, this is just what it is, right? I mean, it doesn't feel right, but this is just what it is, and this is how the world is, and almost. And it's like every single time something or someone appeared in my life that said something or did something that restored my faith in knowing this is not the real thing. This can't be it. This artificial world, this artificial system cannot be it. And I'm sure I was right. It's not it. It's not it. So this artificial system, this artificial world that we live in is not broken. It is what it is. And those who created it did a great job with looking at their intentions in mind. Our most important task is to stop believing in it and stop seeking our validation from it. Stop seeking our self-importance from it. Stop seeking anything, for that matter, from it. We have to free ourselves from this belief in the structure. And this is not an easy thing to do, because it provides us with a false sense of comfort. It provides us with a false sense of security. And most people are in a waiting position within this system. So if I do this for the next 10 years, then I'll get that. If I keep my head down long enough, then I'll get that outcome. And most people are in a waiting position. They don't even realize it. They're waiting for something. Maybe next year it will happen. Maybe next month it'll finally happen. Maybe the big breakthrough will come. But what if you can start taking steps today And you can create those breakthroughs in your life regardless of what that structure and that system does. What if you could take one step, and just one step, just look at one step and then take the next step. And people say, well, how? What do I need to do? Listen, those answers aren't really hard to figure out. What can you do? Ask yourself, what can I do to create greater freedom and sovereignty in my life? And what that means is to be less or not at all dependent on structures and decisions and politicians that I have no control over. There are plenty of people who are really, really rich, who used this system so much to their advantage that they became very, very rich. As a matter of fact, there was a sort of a safety mechanism for those in power. And they said by the time that some people figure out how the system really works, they'll be too busy trying to benefit from it to do something about it. So I have no, I do not speak out against, as a matter of fact, I encourage people to get abundant. I encourage people, if they can do it, especially or only in ethical and good ways, of course, but I encourage people to get more abundant because it allows you to use these artificial tools that we're using anyway to dig your way out. So I encourage people to not push away opportunities to become more abundant, to align with those opportunities. Do it in ethical and good ways. Make sure that everybody benefits in the process and it's all good. But then ask yourself, is this money that I made, is this abundance that I created, is it here so I can just fulfill my ego wishes for the moment? Is it here so I can buy useless material stuff? Or will it allow me to sovereignize my life? Will it allow me to create greater freedom? Without those means, it is very, very hard in today's world to do it. But ask yourself, what small step can I take? And I'm going to give you the excuse killer. Many years ago, someone gave the excuse killer to me because I was in a position where I thought that I needed to wait for others to do their part so I could finally do mine. And if only they fulfilled that promise, then I could finally be okay. And if only that and that and that happened, then I'd be fine. I was waiting. I was a waiter too. At some point I was waiting too for something. And someone gave me the excuse killer. And he said to me, do what you can with what you have where you are. That is an excuse killer. Do what you can with what you have where you are. Nobody is saying do things you currently cannot do because you don't have access or the means to it. Do what you can with what you have where you are. And everybody has something they can do. I don't know what that is in your life, but you can figure that out. One little thing that your future self will thank you for. One little thing that brings you closer to a life of more freedom, more joy, more sovereignty. And start doing that thing, whether it's learning something that you need to learn, connecting with someone you need to connect with, whatever that is, do what you can with what you have where you are. The only path is in this individuality here. And if we have millions of people who live an individual, free and sovereign life, then the collective follows. Then the collective falls into that energy. That is how all of this works. There is no quantum financial system that will save things for us. There are no whiteheads that can solve our individual life challenges. And while this might trigger some people and they say, Jean, you're taking hope away from them. No, I'm actually hoping I can inspire them to empower themselves and realize that they don't need that anyways, and it is impossible to begin with. The same entities that created this system that we currently have are now tearing it down. It was all designed from the beginning. They steer you away from the truth. They let you believe in the lie for so long, and then they tear that lie down and they leave you disillusioned. Why? So they can give you their final optimal solution. It's the problem reaction solution paradigm, right? I mean, David Icke has talked about this for so long, and others have too. Problem reaction solution paradigm. With every day and every little thing where you bring power back to you and you invest in your own life and in the life of your family, and then through that serve your brothers and sisters and inspire and help them, you create that path to freedom and to sovereignty. It won't come from a system. It will never come from a system. All right, my friends. Thank you so much for tuning in. You know we love you. We appreciate you. We'll be back with you again very, very soon.